And go.
Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome back to the Wood by Wright shop. Today we're going to be having a little bit of fun finishing up the molding plane. We're making a dovetail plane and I'm really looking forward to this because this is one of these steps where everything just kind of comes together and it's like one of these aha moments. So yes, we'll be doing that in a little bit. We've got a few events coming up. There is a meeting this weekend in Ottawa, Illinois for the MWTCA, and I am planning on being there. So hopefully that will all come together. And then also the Springfield MWTCA is coming up, Springfield, Missouri. So I'm hoping to be out there for that. That's in 3 weeks, I believe it is. And to be to either of those, you have to be an MWTCA member. But it is one of the best places in the world to buy hand tools. So if you want to come see me, come on out and say hi. I think those are the only events that I have on the calendar right now. What does that look mean?
Nothing.
So yeah, we're looking at other events and things like that, but we'll see how that comes. But yeah, today we're going to be making a dovetail plane. So if you haven't seen this, there's a link down below where we have all the other steps. This is the 4th video on it, and hopefully we're going to be finishing it up tonight. So up until this point, it has basically just been a block of wood, but tonight we want to actually get it into something functioning and working. So this is the fun part. So let me show you a little bit closer up on here. How this actually comes together. So a molding plane is a really simple thing with a wedge, an iron, and a body. That's all it really is to it. The problem is getting all of these to work in perfectly. So the first video was about cutting out the opening in here. The second video was about creating the sole and shaping the iron to fit the sole. The last video we had was some of the final detail on fitting it together and getting the wedge in there. Now we're going to work on the body and actually taking it for a test drive. Now once the iron can go in and the wedge can go in and everything is sharpened up, then it's a functioning plane. You don't really have to do any other details. The other details are just there so that it looks good and feels good. And actually that's pretty close. So we can actually take this and put it on here. And so now that we have it all in there, I thought I'd take it for a quick run here and show you how this turns out. Because once it's all strapped in there. Oops. Still getting the image good. Focus. There we go. So now I'm just going to do it on here without a fence. Normally what I do is I have a saw line in there and I let the teeth fall into the saw line and I can create a sliding dovetail here. Or I can just freehand it. Get one in there. And once I get a developed groove, it'll just ride in that groove. And slowly this dovetail will emerge on here. With a few passes. And just like that, we've got ourselves a sliding dovetail. I'd have to flip it over and do the same on the other side, but you can see how that groove comes in. Actually, let me zoom in a little bit and show you. I did it on the other side here a little bit ago, so you can see how that comes out. Focus. There we go. So you can see that is what the sliding dovetail will create. So there's the groove that we just made right there on that end. Kind of fun. But yeah, let's actually get into the final touches on this. Any questions on this before I dive in? Come on, switch back over.
See, Brian Ross asked, what kind of wood did you use?
This is actually made out of red oak, which is not the preferred best wood ever, but it is a good functional wood. If I had my druthers, I'd probably pick a beech. I think my wife would pick a beech too. But even like a hard maple would probably be a little bit better. But oak is actually a surprisingly good body. It's a little bit more porous than I'd like, but it does the job very well. So let's actually take this apart, and we're going to clean out the body. The other thing we did last time is we talked about putting this little shelf in here. That is really not there for any particular purpose other than to look good, feel good, and give it a little bit of sense of style. Because originally people were very, very conscious about the style and look of this. What I want to do on here is I want to create a couple other little recesses. Rather than putting a chamfer on this edge, I'm just going to shelf it a little bit. So it's basically taking the plane and putting it at a slight angle right across that top corner. So to do that, I'm going to strap it in here between two dogs. Make a little bit of a squeaky noise. Squeaky noise is very important. Just ask my daughter. She'll make all the squeaky noises you need. And then I'm going to, actually first, before I do anything else, I need to plane the surface. It's all dirty from being handled. So just a couple passes with this. And we'll be able to clean that surface up. Make it really nice and happy. There we go. Now the back side of this really doesn't matter anything particular. If I were really, really picky about it, I'd draw a line about 3/8 of an inch down and about 1/8 of an inch in. But I'm just going to set this on here and I'm going to eyeball it. Just holding it at a slight angle. And I'm also looking at the width of the curls that are coming off. I want those curls to be about 3/8 of an inch wide. That lets me know I'm taking off about 3/8 of an inch. And once you've done one side, just make it take a little bit deeper shaving. Then you can flip it over and do the other side. I'm just making this side match the side that I already did. Now it's really hard to see, but you can kind of see this little taper here. Doing the same thing on this side here. On this end, we're leaving this corner nice and square. So for that, I'm going to set this on here, and I'm going to actually skew the plane. So, focus. Just like I would be going across the plane this way, what I want to do is work down here, and I want to go across the end, but I'm going to skew it. I'm going to lock it down so it doesn't rock so much on me. I'm going to skew the plane and go across this way. And I'm going to go until I have that same profile all the way across there. And just like that, we have the same profile here that we've got here. Now on this back end, when you're holding a plane, this sharp corner doesn't feel good in the hand. On the front end, the corner isn't a problem because you're grabbing it more like this. So you're kind of pinching the corner. And you'll often see that in a lot of other planes. The front corner comes to a square here, whereas the back corner is rounded over. So let's round over the back corner. Ooh, got a little chip off. Any questions while I'm setting that up?
Tim BBQ asks, can you describe the process of inserting a boxwood strip?
I am going to talk about that at the end. I decided not to do that in this video. I don't think I have enough time for it, though I might make a good standalone video sometime in the future. But yes, I will be talking about that towards the end. Okay, so first thing I want to do is I'm just going to lop this off. Just knocking it off at 45 degrees. Taking off little chunk after little chunk until I get it right about where I want. Then I'm going to come down here, a little steeper angle, And then I'm going to come back here and do the same thing. This is one of those methods that if you learn it well, it's incredibly fast and is a lot of fun to do. And particularly if your name is Paul Sellers, you can do it almost instantly. Now, I always leave a little bit of mess on here, and I can come and clean it up just by doing this, and just slowly detailing out any facet that may have been left by it. But one way I find to do it a little bit better is grab a file and just let the file do the work for you. And this way, you'll end up with a really nice smooth transition all the way around that you can't beat, and feels really, really good. Now before I go any further, I forgot to do the top of this. I still have some marks left on the top of this from the plane, from the plane. Woo, going against the grain. Just feel that diving in. Let's go the other way. Taking off a little bit more than I probably want to too. So I'm just going to go until those marks disappear. There we go. Nice smooth body all the way across the top. And now I want to create this chamfer that I put on these two sides. I want to do that here. But on this side, I want it to stop here at this ledge, and I want to follow the curvature around. So again, I'm going to clamp that in here. And this is just freehand carving at this point, which really scares a lot of people. I mean, I guess for some of it, I can come over and do this. And then I can match those two up like this. Just taking the chisel. And a chisel really is a plane, or in this case, a plane is a chisel. And so as long as you learn to control it, you can do the detail to then splice out between the two. And if you don't have that there, you can just do this. And if you really want to clean it up and make sure that it's perfect, you bring out your file. And a file will give you that really nice, flat, smooth surface from the transfer all the way around. So the file will act as kind of like a float going all the way across. A much, much finer float. Now the problem is, on this side, I want this chamfer to come around and then stop at this little ledge. Zoom in a little more. So on this one, we have to do it all with the chisel. It's the exact same thing here, just a little bit of carving. And I'm going to run it right up to that shelf. Flip it over, bevel down. This will allow me to kind of scallop out into there. I love it when my wife laughs behind my back.
Oh,
You disgust me.
Alan wasn't on yet, and he's the whole reason for. I was going to give him a hard time, but he wasn't on.
Are you doing movie quotes?
No, he wasn't on, and I.
Oh yeah, he's
anyways,
the whole reason we're doing this one.
Yeah.
Now the last
But
thing
I
I
wanted
want
to
to
harass him once he got on.
last thing I want to do before shaping is I want to feel it. And there's still a bit of a sharp edge here right on that corner. And so there's a couple of ways I can fix that, but my favorite way is actually just to grab a file, just to quickly knock off that corner with a file. Just round it over ever so slightly. And that little bit of rounding just feels really, really good. Doesn't take much at all, just a little bit. And suddenly, now it feels like a much better surface. Do one more pass right here. Just to knock off that edge. There. So now we have that body. Another thing we actually need to do on here is this little ledge here. The problem is, when the chips come up, let me get in a little closer for you here. Sorry, get out of the camera way. When the chips come up through here, they hit the iron, and they'll come up into here, and they'll run into this flat ledge here. And that's going to stop them from coming out. So I actually want to taper this wedge so that there's a bit of a slide coming out. So rather than them piling up in here, they actually will come out the escapement here. So I'm going to clamp it into this spot. Going to grab dovetail saw. I'm just going to hold it right at the angle of that bed here. And I'm going to cut it at a slight angle down to create that wedge. Do the same thing over here. I feel really weird just using the tip of the saw, but if I use the whole thing and I just start cutting into things.
2 mom jokes.
There we go. Now we've done that, we can come in with a smaller chisel. Move the camera in a little bit closer for you. Not that close, not that close. Right there, focus. Then we can come in with a smaller chisel and quick and slowly remove the waste in here at that angle. And you can tell I'm just eyeballing this. There is no method of madness. You're just basically going down until you meet the point inside. So you can create a small wedge between the two. At first you're taking off fairly large chunk after fairly large chunk. And then you're going to take off a little bit smaller chunk and a little smaller chunk until you get a nice smooth surface, transitioning between one and the other.
Just so you know, we owe Alan, but you're not paying attention.
We owe Alan. Oh, wow.
Well, actually, it says 2 mom jokes, so apparently we have upgraded from the dad jokes.
Oh, do you have a mom joke you want to tell?
I actually have one.
Okay, what's your mom joke?
I once had a dream that the ocean was full of orange soda. It was a fantasy. Haha.
That was a good one.
There was another one I was just trying to think of, but I can't remember.
Okay.
But anyways, I have to harass Alan because the whole reason we weren't on yesterday was because we were ill. And Alan was hoping and praying that we couldn't do the live yesterday,
Because
so he
couldn't
could
make
be
it.
here. So it's all Alan's fault that we're topsy-turvy.
And just like that, we've got ourselves a little slide in there so that all the chips now can eject out this surface here without getting jammed up in the edge. So when we put in the wedge, we have a nice transition off of the wedge onto this without having a hard stop right there. Now if I wanted to, I could come in with the time and I can be very, very careful and slowly take off a little bit here and just clean off all of those shavings. May even bring in a file and scrape it all down and smooth everything out. But don't have time for that right now. If I really wanted to do all that detail work, I could. Is it going to make a matter at all? No. From this point on, everything else is just a little bit of detailing and shaping. So we just want to get things functional. And from this point, it's a fully functional plane. You really don't need to do much of anything more. But I want to talk about finishes, because when you get into that, you're going to get into a lot of arguments and discussions. But
You looked at me when you said arguments and discussions.
I don't know what you're talking about, babe. But before we do that, I think I owe Alan another one.
You do.
So let's see. Why did the mortgage broker go out of business?
Why?
He lost interest. Oh, come on. That's worth at least a chuckle.
I could say something, but I won't.
Really? You're going to hold yourself this time?
Oh!
If you would like to see me at future dates, I'll be in the doghouse.
Says the man who just got back from a weekend. We're feeling better, can you tell?
So there we have our molding plane. Everything on it is basically done and functional, but we need to actually do the finish. This is the protective surface that goes in the plane. Now, a lot of people really like having an actual protective surface, and I see a lot of people putting shellac on the planes. Personally, I don't like that, because this is a hand plane. It's something that's designed to go by hand. And a lot of the old planes, you can tell that they were just hit with a paste wax or an oil, and some of them get really, really dark, and they'll actually get like this black hue to them. And that is from the tallow that a lot of English woodworkers would have. And the tallow gets over everything. And it is basically the lubricant they'd put on the sole of a plane. Tallow will slowly over time turn everything black. And so this, when it was made, was the same color as this. It's beech, but it's very similar. Beech and oak are fairly similar in tone. But for me, it's boiled linseed oil and paste wax.
Shocker.
Surprise, surprise. I just like the way it goes on. So, before I do that, I'm actually going to, the other thing is that a lot of makers would then stamp the plane. And so you'll see a lot of planes with the stamp in the nose. It was common for the maker to put the stamp in the nose, and then for the owner to put a stamp in the heel. And so sometimes you'll see planes with a dozen stamps on them, where we'll have one in the nose and then a whole bunch in the heel, and they'll be stamped over top of each other as the owners have changed over time. So what I often do is I'll get my where'd it go?
What are you looking for?
I normally do, but I'm not going to do it this time. What?
What are you looking for?
My brand.
Your brand?
Yes, my brand. What?
Nothing.
What are you doing over here? You're scaring me. I have a brand that I normally will brand things with, but it's disappeared. And I'm hoping to do a video. Oh, there it is. I'm hoping to do a video on them soon.
Yeah.
Normally I would heat it up and brand the toe. But I won't do that tonight, as it makes a lot of noise to kick on the propane heater. But hopefully we'll have a video coming out on that here soon.
Yeah.
So let's actually finish this thing. And any questions while I'm getting this finished?
Let's see. Tim BBQ asked, are there any special considerations to making the skew angle plane?
As opposed to any other? No.
I don't know.
Because this isn't skewed. It's just tapered. Making it skewed, it's just a little bit more geometry. And I have a video on making a spill plane, which is skewed as well as angled. And so there's a whole bunch of geometry that goes into that. I'm hoping to do another video because the first video I had on doing a spill plane was more or less a how to fail at it. But got to keep it real every now and then. But yeah, there's just a lot more geometry that goes into those. So I've had a lot of people asking me, boiled linseed oil. I make my own, and so that's why this jar looks like it's ancient of days. I've had this jar for, 4 years now? And it's almost time to get a new one because it's got a good 1/4 inch on the outside that's been dripped on it over time. And so that's why I often will apply it with my hands, because I like to actually feel the wood and watch how things soak in. It feels really, really good. So here, I'll actually zoom in so you can see the oak getting oiled. But what other questions we have on applying this?
Let's see. Robert
This
Thoelen, however you say it, asked, are there any videos on making hollows and rounds?
hollow and round is exactly the same thing as what I've done here. It's just rather than flattening the sole, you carve out your shape you want. And usually you create one, and you use that as a template to then create its mating pair. So if you create one hollow, then you can create one round to match it precisely. Now, when a company would make a whole pile of them, they would actually have masters or mother planes that would have 1/2 of them already, and then you would make the other half with the first half you made. That way you always had a perfectly matching pair. But in the end, you make them the exact same way, just with a gouge in them rather than a flat sole. So yeah, what else we got?
Let's see. Shawn OBrien asked, any risk of transferring oil or waxes to pieces you're planing that will ultimately affect a glue joint or finish?
Nope. No word of fear at all. Even on my metal planes, I use paste wax on the sole to help them lubricate them, and no problem at all with it transferring. That does not affect the plane because you're always taking off material, and the small amount that might be on there really doesn't affect anything. A lot of people really worry about that though, but it really is not an issue. Here, as soon as I get this one coated, I'll show you what I'm talking about.
And then Johnny G's DIY asked, how about wood grain direction? Does that matter much?
On these, all of the grain is actually running uphill that way, so that as I plane back, any fingers that are sticking down will get laid back against the plane. So all of the grain is running uphill if it has any. Most of this is pretty darn flat, but it does have an ever so slight uphill grain this way. So as I'm planing forward, you're not catching anything. Otherwise, if the grain runs down this way, if I planed forward, that grain sticking out would catch on things and tear back. But yeah. Oh my! What happened here?
Mm-hmm.
Who do I owe? What went on?
No, it's what do you call a group of security guards in front of a Samsung store?
Group of security guards in front of a Samsung store?
Mm-hmm. Guardians of the Galaxy.
Ooh! Oh, that is a good one!
So I got $10 because I stole your joke book without you realizing it.
Ah, is that what you were doing? Thieving little woman?
Hey! You should be proud of me!
I thought it was a good description. Thieving little woman? Never mind.
No, keep digging. Keep digging. We'll be eye to eye soon. Just keep digging.
Yeah, to answer the question about planes, so normally I have planes, and if you've never used wax or oil on your metal planes, you are completely missing out. Definitely go out to the shop and try it. Even if you just have a candle, run the candle on the sole a couple times, and you'll be amazed. It's like a brand new plane. It suddenly just glides through the wood, and it feels amazing. So I use this stuff that I made. I made this block probably about 2 years ago, and I've just done a little bit of it, and it's beeswax impregnated with linseed oil, raw linseed oil, and I use this on all my planes. Even my wooden body ones, I'll finish them off with some wax on the sole, because everyone's sole needs a little wax. So then the next step on this is once I've let these fully soak in, And I'm probably going to let them sit overnight and fully soak in the oil, and then I'll put another coat on them. I'm going to wipe them all off, but to show you guys, I'm just going to go ahead and wipe them off now. That way we can put them to use and see how this looks. What other questions we got? I love this part.
Haznonehere asks, has beeswax ever been used for sealing wood?
Oh yeah. I mean that's what I use, and most of my paste waxes are from a beeswax. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I actually have a couple videos on making your own paste wax. So look up how to make paste wax, and I'll probably be up there. But yes, I really like beeswax on there, and it's one of the oldest traditional waxes out there. So you will find that quite a bit.
Oh, Brian Ross, I think he asked this earlier and I accidentally skipped it. Have you ever tried making a plane without using a plane?
Well, I could very easily do that. The question is why? Because a plane is nothing more than a jig for a chisel. And I have a couple videos on making things using nothing more than a chisel. And I'm actually working on a stool that I'm hoping to have out here soon that is building an entire stool with nothing more than a chisel. I mean, literally I take a chisel and a leather strop and I go out into the woods and I cut a tree down with a chisel and I chop it apart with a chisel and I turn it into furniture using just a 1/2-inch chisel. So yes, the idea of making a plane without a plane is an old joke, but it's really kind of a worthless one, because how often are you going to make a plane when you don't already have a plane? Most people out there are going to immediately go and get a number 4 or number 5. That's the common thing. Yes, if you go back in history, eventually there was one person who made one without a plane. But at what point did it become a jig that just holds the chisel in place to becoming a plane? Because that's something that has been morphing over time. So it's an old argument, but it's really kind of confusing because there's been just this metamorphosis over time from sharp object to what might be considered to a chisel, to a jig to chisel, to a plane, and then all the thousands of steps in between that have been going on. So, yeah. What are you laughing about now?
What kind of wax does James use on its head? That shine is exactly what I want for a writing desk.
Actually, the wax I use on my head is one that I got when I was in Brazil.
And when...
You don't get that one?
I get it.
Oh, she got it. Okay, good.
Never mind.
I did a video a while ago on making paste
mind.
wax. And I started the video off with the joke of whatever wax you use, just make sure it doesn't come from Brazil. And I've had so many people mad at me over the years about, why are you complaining about wax made in Brazil? Brazil makes great wax. It's like, I'm sorry, but apparently...
It's supposed to be a rated G show. Come on.
Okay, let's put this thing together and give it a test drive. And I want to talk through, number 1, how do you set this up? And number 2, putting the boxing in, because I know a few people have been asking about that. I'm not going to put boxing in this one, but I might do a video in the future of putting boxing in this one, just not right now. It was just the time involved that wasn't going to make it quite right. So what I'm going to do is I want to actually slide this into place. I'll first need to switch over cameras so you can see this a little bit closer. Now I've gotten oil all over everything here. I'm going to slide it into place, but I'm going to keep the iron retracted so it's not going to cut anything here. And it's in about a 1/16 inch or so. Next thing I want to do is I want to push the iron flat against the back of the plane so it's nice and well seated there. And then I'm going to tap in the wedge so that the wedge is nice and well seated. And then again, I'm going to make sure that the iron isn't sticking out. And then what I like to do is actually put my finger right over the iron and tap it forward just a little bit until I feel the iron just sticking out just a little bit. And then I'll eyeball down and see that it's sticking out. In this case, it's sticking out a little bit too far. So to back it out, we're going to hit the back of the plane. A little bit more. One more. There we go. Always tap the wedge back in. I'm just going to tap it forward just a hair. There we go. Now it's where I want it to be. And right now it's right on the edge. I might take a shaving, I might not. But we're going to put this in place and give it a try. a test scrap of wood.
Something just went out of focus.
What's that?
Fix it.
Here, let me refocus on this. Okay, so let's see. I'm actually going to, rather than cutting it on the angle, I'm going to lay it down flat so I can try and get a full shaving across there. Nothing in there, so I need to tap it a hair farther. Set the wedge. Getting a very slight shaving coming through there. Here, pull that out so you can see. Very, very thin shaving, but mostly coming from the backside. But actually pretty close. One little tap more. Set the wedge. There we go. There's the shaving we're looking for. Really nice and thin. So I can do it with this, just with that very, very thin shaving. You just do one here. The first one sets a groove, and then everything else follows in that groove until we get it down to depth. Oh man, this is so much fun. There's something fun about getting a plane to work. Now, some of the problems you're going to have are, number one, the iron isn't sharp enough. That's probably the most common thing because these irons have to be incredibly sharp. Number two, they'll often jam up and you'll get chips sticking in here. That's often because the mouth isn't quite big enough. In this case, I cut it ever so slightly wrong because I planed it to difference. I planed it to shape after cutting the mouth. So the mouth is a little bit wide over here, but right here it's just about perfect. It's basically the thickness of like 3 or 4 shavings stacked up. So it's a really nice tight mouth. Let's zoom in a little bit and see if I can show you the mouth in this. I don't know if you will be able to see it or not. So here you can see really, really tight mouth here. Just incredibly small. And then over here there's actually a bit of a gap because I planed the sole off after creating the mouth. I didn't quite think about that, but not a huge issue. So
We'll
refocus. There we go. And now we have a functioning plane. And this is taking off really, really fine, thin shavings. Very, very controllable. Very easy to set the depth. But I'm going to take it a little bit heavier. One tap of the iron to set it. One tap on the wedge to lock it in place. And there's a really nice heavy shaving. Taking off about as much as it can fit through that mouth. But it will charge down through this. And we're getting this deep, deep wedge all of a sudden. And so that is basically how you're going to be adjusting the plane. You tap the iron to move it forward. You tap the back to retract it. Also, some people will tap it up here. You'll see some planes that actually have a button up here that you can tap on the button. It's made of something that's harder. But usually, for most of my molding planes, I'll tap on the back. And what that does is it pushes the whole body forward, and the iron basically stays in place and backs out. If everything really gets locked in there, then you can tap your wedge out. You can do the wedge the same way, holding the wedge back here and tapping the plane off. Because this has been freshly oiled, it's really stuck in there. So I'm going to use the back of this, and one light tap here, we can pull that apart. And there's your plane. Last thing I wanted to talk through is putting the boxing in, because that's something that really scares a lot of people. But when you think about it, it's not that difficult. But any questions before I do that?
Let's see. Raphael Pontes asks, James, any thoughts on blunt chisels? Do you own any or recommend transforming a regular chisel into one? No. Because a really good sharp chisel will do the exact same thing a blunt chisel will do. It just needs a little bit more control to do it. And blunt chisel, for those of you who know, is a chisel that has, it's basically, rather than it being a chisel with a 20-degree angle, it has a 90-degree angle, or some really steep angle. And that allows you to, it's basically the same idea as with a smoothing plane. You have a higher angle on a smoothing plane so that you can go through more difficult wood. So if it has a tendency to tear out or splinter apart, the higher angle will make it much easier for that. I have one that is set up like that, and I never find myself using it. I just find that in most instances, I'm going to use just a regular bench chisel and make sure that it's sharp. So everyone's a little bit different, though. So
So throughout the questions here, we're probably going to be getting a decent amount of time to hit a few questions at the end of the night. But I want to actually talk through boxing. And I'm going to grab a plane that has some boxing on it. And explain exactly what boxing is. Boxwood is an incredibly hard wood and very, very durable wood. The problem is it comes from a very small tree, and so there aren't very large pieces of it. Actually, I think it's a bush. Or a bushes tree. Bushes tree?
Weird.
Bushes tree. It's a bush-like tree. I don't know if it's actually classified as a tree or a bush, but it's a small tree.
It's shrubbery.
Shrubbery. We need a shrubber. But boxing is right here. Is out of focus is what it is.
Oh.
There we go. So boxing is this strip of wood that's in here, and it is a much, much harder piece of wood. Let me see if this one... No, this isn't the one that's loose. I have one where the piece itself is loose. This one's not. No. But the nice thing about it being much harder is that it wears better. And because this is a point right here, eventually that point is going to wear down. And as hard as the beechwood is, the beechwood will eventually wear off and this point will start to disappear. If you put boxing in there, it does two things. Number one, the boxing will wear much longer and will last a lot longer. And so you'll often see planes at any time where they have a point, they make a bit of a boxwood there. And so it's a very common thing. The other nice thing about it is that if this boxing wears out, then you can pop out the boxing and put in another piece, and you're good to go again. So it really isn't. It's a thing that allows the plane to last much longer. On a plane like this, there's two different ways to do the boxing. Number one, I can cut a rabbet where I can cut down and across, and then replace this whole toe with a chunk of boxwood all the way across there. Number two, I could cut back at an angle and actually cut it back into here, so I'd have a slot going back in and putting into that. I don't think I would do that. Yes, it is structurally stronger to put it in like that, and if I were using high glue or something like that that can break down over time, putting something in like that is a much better option, because then it's being mechanically held in place. But with some of the better glues and things like that now, it's actually easier to cut down in a 1/4 inch deep here, and then cut in 3/4 inch or so here, and cut out this rabbet all the way along there, glue a piece in place, and then flatten it out to the dimensions that we have. And you can have some boxing right on that corner so you have a wear spot. I decided not to do that because number one, this isn't the best place to demonstrate it, and I've got one coming up in the future that I think will do much better to show how to put boxing in. But it's one of those things that's not really needed. Rarely are you ever going to be using a molding plane so much that you need boxing. Molding planes were commonly used. It was very common that a shop would have a particular style, and they would make these pieces. And they made those pieces all the time. Those were their common trade. And so you would have 5 or 6 molding planes that you would use on every piece that you had. And so you would commonly wear down through them. Well, for the average person now, rarely are you going to make the same thing twice. You're going to end up making different things for your house and for other people. And so rarely do you use a molding plane more than once or twice. So unless you are commonly having the same motif throughout, rarely are you going to wear something down to the point where you need boxing in there. And this particular plane is something I'm going to pull out once, maybe twice a year. And the amount of time it's going to take to wear down the corner in oak is probably going to be 10, 15, 20 years down the road or more. And by that time, I probably have made a couple others in placement for it. So that's why I'm not really worried about the boxing in this one. But I do want to do a more detailed set with a beading plane and with a very, very fine corner on there. It's very important. And so I'll be doing a boxing on that in the future. So I hope that answers some questions on that. If not, let us know in the chat, because we've got another 15, 20 minutes on here, and I figured we can take some time to do some questions. But before that, I'm not sure what we're going to be doing next week. I think it's time to do another Q&A, so we're probably going to just do a whole video due to questions next week. But it depends. I have a few other ideas we might be working on. So if you have something you'd like me to do, let me know. What we got, babe?
You ready for questions?
I'm ready for questions.
Okay. Let's.
Oh, thou thieving.
I'm a hobbit. I'm a good thief. What can I say?
Burglar hobbit.
I was going on an adventure. Anyways, sorry, one of my favorite movies. Anyways, David Shearer asked, my wife hated the smell of BLO I put on a box that I made for her. Is there anything I can do to mask any chemical smells?
Marry a different woman. BLO is one of the most amazing smells in the world.
Don't know that fixes chemical smells.
Well, no, a lot of the times it depends on, if you're using store-bought BLO, there are a lot of other chemicals in there and things like that, and it smells differently, and different companies have different things that they put in there, and so you're going to get very different smells from company to company. So it may be actually trying a different brand of BLO or making your own, and you'll find something that smells very different. This stuff, actually, I love the smell of it. I don't know if you can smell it.
I prefer that. Like, I can't stand shellac.
Mm-hmm.
You know me.
Well, shellac is the alcohol of vaporizing.
Yeah, well, I don't do a lot of, like, stain and stuff, but I feel like BLO doesn't. And I'm very sensitive to smells. So,
yeah, the homemade stuff, I mean, literally, you could drink this stuff. It's just linseed oil. It's raw linseed oil that has been raised to the temperature of polymerization, and so it will polymerize much quicker. The way the store-bought stuff is made is they boil it, but at a much safer temperature, and then they add in chemical dryers so that it will heed the polymerization that way. The way I do it is I take it up to a very dangerous temperature, which is the temperature you have to take it up to if you want to use it without the chemicals. So you just have to be careful you don't burn the house down.
Is the high voice necessary?
Yes, it is, because you have a pot of fire there that's about ready to go boom. I have a couple videos on that if you want to see that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, try a different brand if that's something you want to use. Otherwise, experiment with making your own.
Sorry, Pete Power just put in a little dad joke. Let's see. This is why you show woodworking and not marriage advice. Anyways, Gary Joy asked, can you make a pencil holder out of a log?
Actually, I have made a video on a pencil holder out of a log, using nothing more than a set of chisels. It's actually it was originally intended to be a pencil box, but I mismeasured the pencils, and it wasn't quite long enough for the pencils to fit down into. But I literally took a piece of firewood, and with a set of chisels, turned it into a box. So yeah, you can go check out that video. I think it was entitled something like "How to Make a Box Using Only a Chisel," something like that.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Let's see. Excuse me. Haznonehere asked, what would you use a plane like this for? Sorry, I'm still a bit new to planes.
This is used for sliding dovetails. So basically, if you need to make, here on this one, I've got a sliding dovetail here. So basically, I'd say so basically a lot, don't I?
That and
the whole edge of this is a dovetail in profile, and what that'll allow you to do is you can create a slot that this will slide into. It is a way of holding down a tabletop without any hardware. It's a very common way of doing that, as well as several other joinery techniques that go into it. And so this is where this comes into its own, because you can use this to create the tail very, very easily. And then if you're picky about how to actually make the groove inside, you can put this on there and lock this down, and then use it as a guide to hold the saw while you cut in the slot for the tail to go in. And I have a couple of videos on doing that as well. Look up how to make a sliding dovetail. That's where this really comes into its own, is being able to make sliding dovetails very easily and very quickly. And I have one that I've used a lot, this one, but this one has a very steep angle, and I wanted one with a little bit more of a shallow angle, so that's why we're making this one. Kind of nice and set there. What's next?
Shawn OBrien asks, what do you use on your steel parts to prevent rust?
I have an entire video on how to prevent rust if you want to see that. But I don't have as much of a problem with it down here because I'm in an air-conditioned basement, and it's a very, very nice thing to have. It makes me think about going back to the garage and thinking, no. But most of the time, I'm just very meticulous about oiling things. I have actually set into the calendar twice a year where I go through every tool in my shop and I make sure it's been oiled. And the more you use a tool, the less you have to worry about it, because the more your hand oils get into things and protect the wood. But I do use a lot of 3-in-1 oil. I use a lot of paste wax, and generally that keeps it pretty well. If you're in a moist environment, you're going to have to do a lot more. And I know some people who will do, a once a month run through of all their tools and make sure that everything has been oiled and maintenanced. Maintenance. I love using the word maintenance as a verb. It really drives a lot of people crazy. The things you learn. Why are you looking at me funny? I never drive people crazy on purpose. Oh, one of my favorite ones of all time is I was doing the how to identify trees. And I'm walking through the woods, and one of the things, if you're looking at white pine has 5 needles on it. Red pine has 3 needles on it, on each of their little groupings. And so red, R-E-D, white, W-I-T-E. What?
How do you spell white?
That's the joke.
I know.
I usually get a comment on it at least once a day of, I don't think you spelled white right. I love that one.
Well, the problem is with your spelling. They don't know if you are making a joke or not. I love you, but anyways. Gronlund asked, how do I replace the lateral adjuster on a plane?
You pop out the rivet, and then you put it back in and you peen over a new rivet because they're riveted in place. So either, number one, you can drill out the old one, or you can cone it up and try and jam it through the hole. It's generally a destructive thing. So I normally don't work on anything that has a rivet in the plane. I just work around it. So the lateral adjuster, when I'm restoring a plane, I leave it in place. And it's rare to find one that you can actually put in there. So yeah, I don't like messing with the lateral adjuster normally. So sorry, but yeah, you can replace it. It just takes a lot, and then to find one to go back in that hasn't already been destroyed is very hard to find.
Ready? Michael Bunn asks, instead of boxwood, could you put metal in there perhaps?
You could, yeah. Okay. Yeah, go for it. You just have to probably use epoxy to hold it in place, but yeah, go for it. Actually, I might have to do that. That's not a bad idea. Thanks for that.
Tyler Woods asks, how does boxwood compare with live oak?
Boxwood's much harder. Also, boxwood is diffuse porous as opposed to ring porous. And by that, if you look at oak, you'll be able to see all the holes, and the holes are in line with the rings of the wood. If you look at maple, you can't really see the holes, and if you get a microscope and you look at it, you'll notice that the holes are all over the place. They're diffuse throughout the wood, whereas in oaks, all of the holes are ring porous. And so what that does is it makes oak very brittle and stringy. So if anything gets into it, it will tear off a chunk. Whereas with something that's diffuse porous, it wears it down more than splintering it off. And so that's one of the things that makes boxwood very useful. Is it's very, very smooth, diffuse porous wood.
All right. Tim Royal has 2 questions.
I don't know if we can do that.
Huh?
I don't know if we can do that.
Doesn't matter. I'm the one asking.
Okay.
Do you have a set of hollows and rounds, personally?
Not exactly. I do have this set that was given to me when I was actually in Maker's Central. And this is actually a really interesting set. So I had a chance to show this off if we're wanting to. Don't drop it on the floor. There we go. But no, I don't actually have a full set. I would like to. And these need a good bit of work still. And I'll show you there. Some of the laminations are coming off on them. 2. Whoa. Let's do that. Instead, something more like that. And so these are kind of interesting. Well, they're not hollows and rounds. They're just the rounds. But I would use the rounds to make a matching hollow. And so they were cut out of a block. They cut the wedge in and then laminated on these little strips on the side to hold it together. The problem with that is the lamination is coming loose on these. But they're kind of cute with these tiny little wedges. So it's a design you don't see very often, but really kind of cool. But they were made in England. And I want to restore these and work them out a little bit more because they're just really, really cool. But no, I do not own a full set of regular hollows and rounds. I would like to. One of these days, I've always thought I'd really like to make a set. but that is a lot of work. So you can see how much time I put into one molding plane. Well, if you're going to make a set of hollows and rounds, you've got to do that over and over and over again 16 to 32 times, depending upon if you want a half set or a full set. So, yeah, that's a lot of planes to make. But one of these days I'll probably end up buying a full set because there are a lot of fun things you can do, and I'd like to demonstrate those.
All right.
What's the second question?
So second question is it true hollows and rounds can make virtually any profile?
Yep, very true. Because every profile out there is either a stepped rabbet or a hollow and round of one shape or another. And usually when you're creating a profile, you're actually going to use a rabbet plane to take out the majority of the waste with the rabbet plane. And then you'll bring in a hollow and round out the rabbets that are left in there. And so yes, with a rabbet plane and a set of hollows and rounds, you can make any profile out there.
You ready?
Yep.
Okay. Shawn OBrien asked, what's up with all the blue planes? Is it brand or color use?
The blue ones are ones that I have that I've purchased that were so rusty and so far gone that they needed to be completely torn down. The japanning on them was gone, and they've needed a lot of work. In most cases. In one of them, I just was experimenting, and it was my 4.5. And so anytime that I do a total strip down on a plane and clean off all the japanning and redo it, I paint them blue. And I know that drives a lot of people really crazy, but I like it because I like the blue, and it looks very good on my wall. And so all of the planes that have the blue on it are ones that I have completely restored and reworked. So yes. Now there is a company, Record. They're basically the Stanley counterpart in England. They paint their planes blue, and so I do get a lot of people thinking I use Record planes. I don't actually own a Record plane. Well, I have one down there, but I don't have one that I use. They're all but one of them is a Stanley, and yeah.
Okie dokie. So this next question could also be a suggestion for a live video.
Okay.
So I don't know how in-depth you want to answer it. Kevin Lerma asked, can you talk about side rabbet planes? I didn't know how long of a discussion that would be.
I have an entire video on that. A side rabbet plane is a really fun and specific plane. And basically what it is done is if you create a groove in the wood, what a side rabbet plane will actually do is get down into that groove and widen out the groove so you can actually work on the sidewall of the groove. And the reason that's important is if you have a rabbet plane, or especially if you have a grooving plane, and it cuts a groove in there, but the board you want to slot into that groove is slightly wider than the groove you cut, you can use a side rabbet plane to then come in, and like on this dovetail here, I can come in and I can make this a little bit wider because the iron comes out on the side here and will cut the sidewall of the rabbet. And this particular one has an iron on both sides, so if the grain is running one direction, I can run this way, and if the grain is running the other direction, I can run that way. A really, really fun tool. But I have an entire video on that if you want to see that as well. So, yeah.
All right. Rob Heath asked, when you refer to tallow, is it real tallow as in sheep fat?
Yep, real tallow. And you'll see, if you go into English Workshop, you might see these small containers that they would hold the tallow in. You often have a swing lid to keep the sawdust out. But yes, they would tallow their planes.
Haznonehere asks, is it necessary to put a secondary bevel on a chisel or plane blade?
It's not necessary at all. The reason that it is common is it makes things easier for some people. It's particularly if you grind things. So if you establish your bevel with grinding it, the reason that a secondary bevel is often put on there is that you can lift up the plane a little bit and just hit the very edge of the plane, and it sharpens the iron, and it sharpens that blade a little bit faster because you're just doing a little bit of it. So the secondary bevel is just a way to kind of make things a little bit faster. But if you just sharpen by hand all the time, then there's really no reason to do it at all. And I don't have a secondary bevel on anything I have. It's so much faster if you just do it by hand to go and you're done. Not having to think about, okay, this is the primary bevel, this is the secondary bevel. The idea of a secondary bevel is a very new thing, and it has come with the advent of all the mechanical ways of sharpening chisels. So, yeah.
All right, I got 3 more questions and then a video idea, and then I'm going to stop asking questions. George Ortiz asked, how often do you need to flatten the sole of a wooden plane?
Whenever it goes out of flat. If you are in an area where the weather changes rapidly or changes largely throughout the year, and you are in an open air environment, you may need to flatten the sole once every 3 to 6 months because the wood moves and planes will warp and change. For me, in a shop like this, I probably wouldn't have to flatten the sole much more than once a year or once every other year, depending upon how much I use it. So, yeah, it really varies, but not that much. And a lot of people really get bent out of shape over how flat their sole needs to be. The sole really does not need to be that flat for most things. It needs to be very flat for your jointing plane, and mostly for your smoothing plane. But on most planes, as long as it's flat at the mouth, the heel, and the toe, the rest doesn't really matter. So, yeah.
All right. So, Blue Kestral wants to know, what is the brand of the one non-Stanley plane?
This one? No, that's a Stanley. Stanley is a Bailey. Oh, never mind. They are all Stanleys.
Ugh, disappointment.
I thought I had a Miller Falls. Oh, I do have a Miller Falls.
You did.
Down here. There we go. Miller Falls. But this is the one I turned into a scrub plane. This is the second plane I ever purchased, and still works well. It's just the lock that I put it on. I had a bad one that had a split in it, and I didn't realize when I put it up and it broke off, and I just haven't replaced it. So for right now, this lives underneath my bench. AKA, I'm lazy. Why are you laughing, babe?
I'm not. You're actually not that. You're usually a very, what's the word I want to say?
Handsome?
Always.
What do you got?
David Shearer asks, what blue is it? I love that color.
It is Rust-Oleum metallic blue. And I believe it's the only metallic blue they make. But it is a Rust-Oleum paint. And so normally I primer them first with an etching primer, and then I'll paint them with my metallic blue. Is it the most durable? No. Japanning would be more durable, but it is actually held up surprisingly well.
I was going to say that.
Unless you go up and look really closely on them, you won't notice anything.
Knock first so that we know you're here to look at it. Let's see. Idea. Halloween special. Woodworker's Guide to Carving Pumpkins. Hand tools only.
Ooh. Okay, that does sound like a good one.
The question is, do we make it into a contest?
Ooh.
And then everyone submits their videos of what they made or pictures. I like that idea.
Maybe I could find someone else to invite down for it and have like 3 of us in the shop carving pumpkins side by side.
I want to see theirs.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking through to make it a live special fun. That's a good idea. I'll have to think about that. So yeah, next week we'll be looking at a few things, and I want to talk to my mother and see if I can get her into the shop again before she heads out, because they're heading out to South Korea for 6 months. So yeah.
Are we chiseling off, or you're just inviting her down?
I don't know. We'll see. Might have to do a Q&A with my mother, and that way you can ask her all questions about my childhood. That's dangerous, no. So,
he was a sheltered child.
Cool. I think that about does it, unless you can think of anything else.
No.
Sweet. Well, there is your molding plane. I hope you guys like this, and I'd love to hear your ideas in the future. I actually really like how this came out. It's a nice, quick finish on it. So, yeah, happiness. I think I'll do it for now. And until next time, have a wonderful day.
Bye. Oh, shoot. I gotta find the
button. Play the game. Where's the button? Where's the button? Where's the button? It's down there somewhere. Find it. Find it. Find it. Click.
There.